Hi there, my name's Gary Randall, and welcome to AB&R and the Connected Supply Chain. Today, I have the great experience to be able to have a little conversation with the smartest guy I know, Mr. Mark Stager from AB&R, our Chief Solutions Architect. And in the many years I've known Mark, there is nothing that he can't figure out or doesn't understand. So I probably hyped you up a little bit, but welcome, Mark.
Oh, I don't know how I can beat that introduction. Whoa.
Well, welcome very much. Today we want to have a conversation about radio frequency identification, or short RFID. So to start this out, what is RFID?
So at its basic level, RFID is using radio waves to identify an object of concern, such as an asset, some inventory items, a person or people, pets. There's a number of different uses it's been put to. The first time that we used it was in World War II. It's kind of interesting. The Germans kind of figured out that if they tilted their planes as they were coming in, they would look different on the radar. So that was actually kind of the first application of what we call a passive RFID system, or an RFID system that doesn't broadcast the signal. So the English kind of also picked up on this, and they started putting transponders on their planes. And so that's kind of the first example of an active RFID system, or an RFID system that does, an RFID tag that does emit a signal. So it's been around for quite a while. It's also kind of, when we look at it from an auto ID perspective, we're also kind of refer to it as a talking barcode, or a way for things to identify themselves without having to be scanned. So as they move around a warehouse or an office building or a hospital, whatever the application is, they're identifying themselves automatically by speaking up as they enter fields of energy.
That sounds amazing. That sounds like some pretty cool stuff. So can you give us some examples of, some of the various types of RFID? It sounds like there's different ones available, and some examples of how those are currently being used?
Sure. So as we mentioned above in the history lesson, we have two types of RFID that are used commonly. It's active, which has a battery in it, so the tag has a small transponder with a battery that chirps at a given level. And then there's passive, and they're kind of innocuous. They're like labels. They don't send any information out. They're quiet all the time until they enter a field of energy, and then they say, "Hi, I'm Sam," or "Hi, I'm Alice." So you get these two different types of technologies. So they all work on different frequencies also. So like with the passive technology, the technology that doesn't have a battery, it can be as simple as a tiny little tag that gets injected into like your pet. So those are typically low frequency tags at like the 125 kilohertz range. And then you go into other applications like opening doors into like a 1356 idea. These tags, both low frequency and high frequency, the 125 and the 1356, both are fairly short range. So they'll only really get a read from an inch to 6 inches away. As far as the rest of the passive world goes, the rest of it is all UHF, or ultra high frequency. There's a number of different frequency ranges here, depending on what country that you're from, or what country you're using the technology in. The idea behind this is you're able to get a read from, depending on the tag, usually 10 feet is a good range you can get with a fairly good sized tag. But on some of those immense tags, we have tags that are the size of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. You can get up to 50 feet with those. So there's all these different frequencies depending on your application. And on the active side, there's a 433, which is actually being used for toll roads. So those are those little sun pass things you see in Florida as you drive through toll booths that automatically identify you and charge you money. As well as what's becoming a standard in the industry on the active side, the battery power tags, is this concept called BLE, or Bluetooth low emission, or Bluetooth low energy. those tags, in the range of like $10-ish. You can put a tiny little tag about the size of a button battery on something and track it around in a plant, or you can have an app on a phone so that when a phone encounters a tag, it gets a GPS coordinate from a satellite and then sends its data back. So, this BLE on the active side is becoming very, very popular. And they're used to make what we call RTLS systems. So in the active world, since you don't have to have a field to charge a tag and have it emit its information, in the active world, we can actually show you a map where it's the RFID dream, right? Being able to hit a button and poof, all your assets show up on a computer rendered image of your building. So that's possible with active and a very common application for it.
That sounds like RFID can be used for almost anything out there. That sounds very, very exciting for the technology world we live in. So I'm talking to clients all the time. And so as we look at the different frequencies and the different examples that you have given, we're generally talking to people applying this technology business to business or within their business. So can you give some ideas of how this technology or how RFID can help these clients?
From a supply chain side, it gives us real-time data about the location of goods, either in transit or in your warehouse or in your office. You could, as I said before, with the RTLS example, you can flip a switch and know where everything is. With passive RFID, you can flip a switch and know where at least everything was as it went by, like what we call a pinch point. You could have a dock door application and you know exactly what was shipped, what went in truck A versus what went in truck B. So, and all of this can happen without any labor involved. Once you install the infrastructure, it just works itself, and all you need to do is go into, say, a web page and hit refresh, and all of a sudden your asset locations or inventory locations are updated. So you reduced labor costs are huge. As a matter of fact, there's a study that was done that said through the life of an asset, if you're using barcodes to track it, it would cost about $1.27 per asset based on 10,000 assets. Now, compared to RFID, which again doesn't require any labor to track it, is about 14 cents an asset, and that includes the cost of the tags and the cost of the readers and the cost of the software to implement. So, as you can see, it's almost 10 times less to implement a barcode system, or 10 times more to implement a barcode system than RFID if you look at the labor and all that is involved.
That's pretty amazing. That's a considerable amount of data. We had a conversation with one of our clients that have been running an RFID pilot for a short amount of time. And one of the things they've been able to prove with your example you gave earlier of pallets coming and going from a vehicle, they were able to, within one shift, move a forklift driver from loading 4 full trucks in a shift to 6 full trucks in a shift. So maybe that doesn't seem like a lot, but that, to me, that's a 50% labor savings and more throughput, right? When you start looking at a warehouse not needing as much room because you could move stuff through faster, there's a lot of labor savings that go into that. So that stuff's just incredible. So now that we see how great and all the use cases are for it, and since it's been around since the World War II, why now? Why? It's been around for so long. Why is it finally attaching to these businesses?
Well, we have Walmart and the DoD to thank for that. Going back about 9-10 years, there was a big push to work on savings using RFID. So Walmart and the DoD required some of their suppliers to tag things, and that increased the demand for transponders. So what ended up happening was, back in 2005, for example, the average cost of an RFID inlay or an RFID tag was about $1.10. And in today's economy, we're looking at about 7 cents. So we went from $1.10 per box or per asset to tag down to 7 cents. So a lot of folks are able to really get a return on investment because the price of the tags are so much less than they used to be. So if you have thousands of things to tag, it's not as much of a big deal as it was back in 2005 before all this happened.
So we have customers come to us all the time saying, I don't want to use that old barcode stuff. I want to go right to RFID. What's your comment on that?
It depends on the requirements. And, this is the technical guy talking. If you think about a couple of different use cases, like I want to do a cycle count, right? That's a great use case for RFID because, we have customers that are driving forklifts around that have RFID readers on them. And as they drive by a certain location, it's reading the location and it's reading the stuff that's in that location automatically. So it substantially cuts down on the amount of time it takes to do a cycle count. So that's a good use for RFID. Here's a bad use. Let's say you're a police officer, counting type person, and you have to give out radios, and there's a line of people waiting to pick up radios, right? So if you're trying to use RFID for that, it's a little more difficult because you want to make sure that radio A goes with officer 1 and radio B goes with officer 2. Well, if you're of an RFID tag with a range of 30 feet, when you pull the trigger, you're going to get 30 tags and 30 officers, and you're not going to know which officer got which radio. So for me, it comes down to the requirements. Always look at the requirements before you try to stick a solution somewhere.
That sounds great. Well, it sounds like barcodes and RFID can live very nicely together, and they're both going to be around for a while.
I totally agree.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. Always enlightening to talk to you, and we will see you next time.
Next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Well, this is Gary, your supply chain guy, and thanks for another opportunity to discuss technology to help your business. And remember, applying the right technology to your business will help you do more with less.